Everybody, welcome to Real Talk, where we have real talk about God and culture. This is our first installment of this. This is going to be so cool. So Pastor Jay, sitting here with Pastor Jay, tell us about this.
So here's the vision. We want to tackle everyday life issues. Anything and everything is on the table. Our hope is long-term that people will ask questions and we will talk about them and get them out on the table from a biblical worldview, from a Christ follower type of worldview. And literally, we're going to talk about everything.
Yeah.
Politics, morality, church life. What does it mean to follow Christ every day? It's going to be good stuff.
Yeah. So good thing we're not talking about anything really that divisive today at all.
On the first one.
Not. On the very first week. No, seriously. So there's some growing tension with culture and those who call themselves Christians with this idea of tattoos and tattooing. So there's a lot of tension there. So can you walk us through what some of this looks like?
So the big question would be, is it okay for a Christ follower to have a tattoo?
Yeah.
Not that you have any concern about this at all, right? Yeah.
Obviously, my mind is made up.
So how many tattoos do you have?
4.
They're just awfully large and cover most of your body.
Yes, exactly, of course.
Yeah, so, I can understand that from a guy like you because a guy like me, you just don't do that because you don't put bumper stickers on a Ferrari, right? But I can get it for you. Okay.
Fair enough.
So this question of whether tattoos are right for a Christian is a real question. It's a big issue. But let's back this out a little bit because it seems weird for people outside of the church to even care about this issue. They've already settled this issue in their mind. They think it's no big deal. There's no reason to be concerned. It's like all kinds of issues like gay marriage or transgenderism or any of that stuff. That issue is settled in their mind because they don't want to think biblically. It's just not in their DNA. It's not who they are, and we don't expect them to because they're not followers of Christ. But as we follow Christ, it is important that we ask the question, what does God think about everything that we do? So we want to filter our lifestyle and everything that we are through the vein of is this something that Jesus would want for us and from us? So this is a big question. So what does the Bible say? I did a little research on this, and I could only find 5 or 6 fairly direct references to tattooing, mostly in the Old Testament. And get this, every one of them's negative.
Of course.
Every one of them's negative. So you are in trouble.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes.
And so you got to ask the question, why? Well, one of the most direct and negative passages in the Old Testament is found in Leviticus 19. Let me just read this for you. You shall not make any cuts on your body for the dead or tattoo yourselves, for I am the Lord. And there's another part of this verse that says, do not have tattoos running down your arm. You got them all over you.
Unfortunately for me.
Yeah. And so the question is what is it talking about? We have to back this out. And when you look at the Bible and in the Old Testament, there are all kinds of rules, all kinds of things that we can and cannot do. And that's true. People say, well, Christianity is a bunch of rules. That's true. There are a bunch of things that we should and should not do. But the question is what do they mean for us today? Well, if you look at the Old Testament, in the book of Leviticus, there are all these laws, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them. And they can essentially be divided into 2 camps. There are moral laws and there are civic laws. Moral laws are those laws that are for all people for all times. They are indicative on how we should live. They give us a prescription of life, and they transfer for all culture for all time. So, for example, do not murder applies to everybody, right? Do not steal applies to everybody but the government, okay? That was a joke. But they're moral laws that transcend life, okay? But then there are these civic laws that were found in the nation of Israel. Civic laws were what set the people of Israel apart. And there are all kinds of them, like you can't trim your beard, or you can't wear different or certain types of clothing, that you could only walk so many steps on the day of the Sabbath. So there are all these laws that are not moral-based laws. They're not forever-based laws. They were to set the people of Israel apart. And people think, well, that's bad. No, it's not bad. It's what made the people of God different. It's what made the people of Israel different. Like Americans, we have certain things that make us different. We have this thing called the Constitution. We have the Bill of Rights. And no matter how much people want to push against it, those things make us Americans, right? And so they had civic law. Well, when you look at Leviticus 19, and virtually every time tattooing is mentioned, they are always part of the civic laws of Israel that says, look, you can't take on a branding. You can't take on a tattooing. And the reason behind it was almost always because that's what the other pagans did.
Yeah.
The people outside of the people of Israel did. They did it to honor their gods. And God says, we're not going to confuse the issue. You're going to be different. Now, when you fast forward into our culture, the average person is not tattooing to honor some sort of pagan god of Rome or the pagan gods of the Canaanites. You know, I think those days are long gone. And we got to be fair to that it's not part of culture anymore. People brand themselves or tattoo themselves for a whole bunch of different reasons, but that's probably not among the top, right?
Awesome. So case closed. We're done.
Not so fast. I do think there's a different set of questions that you have to ask.
Okay, like what?
If you look in the New Testament part of the Bible, in 1 Corinthians chapter 6, it says this. It says, you can basically do whatever you want as a follower of Christ, but you have to ask this question in relationship to the law. You're free from the law, but you have to ask the question, is it beneficial? You can do it, but does it actually benefit your life and the kingdom of God? And this is a bigger question. So I think there are some issues that we have to ask, or some questions that we have to ask if before we go running out and getting a bunch of tattoos. So the first one is this idea of modesty.
Modesty,
right?
okay.
Yeah, modesty.
Okay, so what do boobs, butts, and bellies have to do with this then?
Well, modesty is way more than just the clothing you wear. The idea biblically about modesty is the idea of drawing attention to yourself. And let's be honest, a lot of people get tattoos just to say, I'm bad, I'm this, I'm cool,
I'm different, I'm a rebel.
Yeah, all those things. And you're not the I am. God is the I am. God is supposed to be the center, right? And I get it. You wear a cowboy hat, you're saying, look at me. If you wear weird shoes, I get it. There's no perfect line here. I just think there's a heart examination that has to go on. So I think that's first. I think the second thing that you have to get around, the second question is, what is your motive, right? Because sometimes doing anything, no matter how good it is still wrong if your heart is completely wrong, if your motive is completely wrong. So you look at this idea of rebellion, right? If you're a teenager living at home and your parents say, no, you can't get a tattoo as long as you live under my roof. It is wrong for you to get a tattoo because you are dishonoring them. Your motive is rebellion against them. But even if that goes into adulthood, you know, if you're 20-something years old and you're living at your parents' house and they're basically paying your way in life and they say, come on, I don't want this in my house, you know, for whatever reason, I think you got to check your motive. If your motive is to honor God, there are higher principles at stake here, honoring your parents, honoring the culture around you, and that sort of a thing. So I think motive is very important, right? Yeah. And so I think the third one, and this one almost nobody ever talks about, it's a third M, it's medically. I was doing some research about tattoos, and this will blow your mind. There are a whole bunch of people who have a deathly reaction to tattooing. And of course, there's still hepatitis B and hepatitis C that are related to tattooing. And so I think it's fairly rare, and it's getting rarer as the culture improves in these areas. But I do think it's a real issue for some people, and you better think about it before you do it. And so I think overall, with this idea of tattooing, is that it's a permanent decision, right, with permanent consequences in your life. And you better pray. It could affect your job later. It could affect your spouse. You know, you would not want to get your current girlfriend's name centered right here, and then you break up, right? Yeah. So that would be my thoughts about tattooing.
Awesome. Thank you for the practical advice. All right. Well, this has been Real Talk, where we talk about God and culture. Thanks so much, Pastor.
Boom.